Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you once again to a Valle Verde analysis video. That's right, the famous web horror video series that shook the world with its incredible production value has finally gotten its third installment, coming out at the tail end of June. It was rather sudden, but there was much anticipation, and yet again, Alluvium has outdone himself. There is a lot to talk about here. New surprises, new revelations, new horrors. I'll reiterate once more, if you haven't seen the series already, it's on Alluvium's YouTube channel for viewing anytime, in English or Spanish. The full runtime is about 70 minutes. Then you can check out my analysis video for the first two parts, linked in the description, though bear in mind any theories I present are not definitive. And if you've seen all that already, here's a refresher course. Valle Verde is a cancelled PlayStation game that utilizes a peripheral device known as the TH Brain. A metal lunchbox containing a VHS tape was discovered buried in the woods. The tape contains gameplay footage taken by beta testers. In the footage, we see many glitches, unexpected objects and areas with lots and lots of horrifying images that seem to be themed around Catholicism. 5 children who played the game now seem to be trapped inside the game along with some kind of AI so terrified of everything that's happening that it locked itself deep in the game world where few could find it, and assets from other games appear to be bleeding into Valle Verde. Hard evidence of what's going on is in short supply, so this third episode should confirm or debunk at least a few theories. So let's begin. The episode opens in front of Dr. Nito's lab, where Isaac the robot can be heard, but not seen. His shadow is visible, but not the robot himself. This is due to the shadow being a separate object, as explained in Part 1. The player enters the lab, and we hear a sound sample that was also used in Tetris the Grandmaster 3. Wasn't expecting to make reference to that, of all things. This part of the video shows us that Valle Verde also contains a boxing minigame where you fight Isaac, except for one problem. Isaac's still not there, only flickering every now and then, appearing to be lying down when he does. Almost as if the game is trying to force him into position for the fight, but something is blocking this action and he's actually tied up somewhere else. With no opponent, the player can only jump out of bounds, leading to the most hilarious line in the whole series. "You set a new record!" for the fastest failure. Dr. Nito pulls no punches. Cut to another clip. The player uses the debug menu to double the rotation speed and then teleports to Alamo, where it's now snowing. Whatever rotation speed is, it seems to have disoriented the enemy that normally attacks in this area. We actually have a name for that enemy. It's known as Herod's Marauder, named for the king in the book of Matthew who ordered all the Jewish children killed because he was trying to eliminate Jesus, rumored to be a threat to his throne. I didn't mention it before because the name was revealed in a Discord emote of all things, but regardless, Pietro suddenly appears and instructs the player to use the compass to ward off the Marauder. This leaves a patch of grass and flowers in place of the enemy, and a circle on the ground lights up along with a path. The player doesn't seem to follow the path exactly, but soon arrives at a vast purple ocean. This most resembles the Oscar zone on the map in the previous episode, which may be linked to Oliver somehow. Exploring further, the player comes across strange fragments bearing the TH Brain logo. A nearby turret or something appears to fire at the player, but doesn't seem to do any damage. Moving further, past a couple of dead bodies, we can see that the fragments are actually from a strange crystal that several pixelated workers are mining. Reminds me of mining in RuneScape. They do know botting is against the rules, don't they? Well, the player passes through a weird door and arrives in the strangest scene yet. The workers appear to be building works of art here, which bear something of a resemblance to the Paravicini drawings seen in the previous episodes. But before we can admire them, we encounter a character who probably came straight out of Banjo-Kazooie. Whoever she or he is, I'm going with she has a unique dialogue box that prints all her lines backwards. She is called Morpheus Oraculum, the Oracle of Morpheus. Morpheus, which means to give shape and is the name of the Greek god of dreams. The Oracle doesn't seem hostile, but also has trouble describing herself and speaks in vague terms as well. This area is apparently her workshop, soon to be a kind of art gallery. She apparently commands the workers to mine and build for her. You can spot a kind of meter appearing over their heads, but most interesting is that she's apparently responsible for those weird chess pieces in the previous episode. The strange objects and maps might be her doing. Another AI? Perhaps one who developed a passion for strange art? Not even she seems to know, but she reveals that the eye on her staff is a dying eye. After asking for a demonstration, we're presented with a strange list of options. I can't really read most of these, but the player selects the one that apparently reads Sunset Harbor or something like that. Using the dying eye, the view changes from PlayStation polygons to a highly realistic image of several monsters standing over a city straight out of a tokusatsu. It's not long before the player is booted from the area. Now hold on just a minute before we move on. When the Oracle first appeared, did you notice a white square being drawn near the player? Almost as if she were trying to select the player as though they were a unit in a real-time strategy game. Sid Meier's Civilization is real-time strategy, right? The game Foxo was apparently trying to play, and now this character is commanding units like in a real-time strategy game. Meanwhile, the whole sequence here does remind me somewhat of the art gallery scene in the previous video. The player examines a work of art there and starts a freaky looking video sequence. The Oracle also definitely has a good smile on her face. These are all things that feel like they're leading me somewhere, but I cannot seem to piece it all together, at least not yet, so we move on. Cut to another area, presumably somewhere else in Alamo, where we see weird birds with spooky faces. The player views a nearby cage sitting on top of a pile of boxes. There are lots of notes here written in what appears to be Enochian, a language seen in the previous videos. Inside the cage is a golden angel. Wait, that's Omniel, the main character from a cancelled PlayStation game. But wasn't he eaten by the bugs in the previous video? But there's more, look at the boxes. The face on the boxes is Kato, the cat who flies the plane in the package delivery minigame from episode 1. So these boxes are from that game? What does it mean? Advancing forward, we see a nest, and hanging from wires is one of the robots from the previous video. The noise it makes is a Morse code message. Apparently it translates to, "Bring a gun and end my suffering." This area is just full of surprises, like a sea of flashing purple water or whatever it is. Purple. As mentioned, the purple color is connected to Oliver both through his portrait in episode 1 and the fact that he was the last known player of Angel Quest, which has a very purple box art. There's definitely something connecting all of this. The player then decides to try touching the purple water. Bad idea, it would seem.
Somebody's up.
Next up is the moment you've all been waiting for. We're going to see the events of March 22nd. This has been hyped up big time, and oh boy is it something. The player arrives in the main town plaza, now carrying 38 coins, to see that the town has been torn apart with many fissures, with several masked figures holding gold idols of Foxo on all fours. In the center of town are 4 pillars with orbs, along with Foxo, Nito, and Ito, about to begin a ceremony. At 3:32, the ceremony begins. This has got to be the ceremony Not was talking about. There is also a dying eye here, and it seems to call forth the massive golden bull that spawned the bugs that ate Eva in the previous episode. Referring to the beast as the light of Prometheus's dawn, Foxo explains to it that they had suffered a setback, and that the women it provided for them failed to uphold their duties. We then see what appears to be some kind of box with women inside it. Wait a minute, we've seen these women before. They look exactly like the women from the store where we first met Matthias. There's also an Argentinian flag on top, which is then removed to reveal Isaac? This is where he's been? He's promptly absorbed into the pillar's orb as Foxo promises a greater offering next time. Nito says, "To the 4th pillar? Why? Previous versions were of lower quality, but this one is as close to genuine as possible. With a little more learning, I'm sure it will not only equal but surpass any of the 5 with ease. I just need a little more time." But he's cut off as the bull straps him to a sort of torture device, erases his mouth, and begins melting his skin. But hold it right there. At 17:13, do you see him? Not is watching, and no wonder this freaked him out so bad. This is one of the most horrifying things I've seen out of the series. And what's that I hear? The music sounds like the finale of Don Giovanni, but in reverse. And it's here that, all of a sudden, a lot of stuff falls into place. Matthias was stuck in that building with the 3 women, characters generated by the demonic AI, if my theory is correct anyways, who were going to force him into this ceremony, but the player, ignoring the task Rosa tried to force onto him, intervened and was able to get him out of there, eventually using a compass to save him from all of this. Foxo was going to sacrifice Matthias, as he had with the other children. Instead, they used a robot, which was not enough to satisfy the demon bull, who then tortured a desperate Nito. There are still a few questions, such as, what is this fourth pillar Nito mentioned? Why did Foxo call this beast the light of Prometheus's dawn? Prometheus, the titan who stole fire and gave it to humans? What's that got to do with this? As the scene closes, we see a clock with a head move its hour hand from 9 to 10. We return to town and see a sort of quest log display the task Ito gave the player in episode 1. It's then crossed out, as if failing the quest. Nito hangs from a gear-shaped structure. Burnt and in pain, yet still very much alive. Gears are becoming a common symbol here. We then cut to an entirely different game. The player is now investigating more games from that huge database we previously accessed Tharsis from. This game is Supaplex Ultra, apparently a cancelled sequel to a game called Supaplex, a semi-clone of Boulder Dash. Come to think of it, you can actually get this game on Switch if you want. Also, notice the flying scissors elsewhere in the level. That stuck out to me for some reason. Anyway, the player exits to the game list. Now then, we can see more of the game list, so I'll need to summarize everything that we can see here once again. Lagnacure is an obscure RPG that came out months after the events of this video, so the game list only has a demo. Supaplex and Dragon Ball Z, which Oliver last played, are cancelled games. Note the TH-Brain compatibility. Off-World Interceptor is real, Under Pressure is not real, and was last played by John Sug. Okay, so he does play video games after all, thank goodness. Domu is not real and was last played by Kazuya. Lifescape 2 is real. Worm Odyssey is not real, also last played by Kazuya. Hexacon hasn't been played by anybody yet and is also not real, and is the game the player selects. I'm not sure why the list is different now. Hexacon was originally listed among Tharsis and other games, but maybe this is a different library or sorted differently. Hexacon starts up with the classic IDOS intro. In the main menu, it seems the player can't change options, and the game detects TH-Brain corruption, but the player begins anyways. The loading screen has a short plot intro, in which the player plays the role of an investigator named R. Trevor, and he's looking into suspicious activity on an artificial island created for the purpose of crystal mining. That's like what was going on in that area where we met the Oracle. Hard to say if there's a connection to Valle Verde as far as the game plot, but maybe the footage will tell us more? Landing on the island, the game starts seriously freaking out as though we're a vine sauce corruption. Blocks with the TH-Brain logo are visible and appear to mark invisible trigger zones. After operating a control panel of some kind, the game freaks out and sends Trevor plummeting downwards, appearing to pass through Alamo and a strange bird before falling even deeper, just barely surviving the fall damage. And this place is crazy. The area is full of the strange bugs that consumed Omniel, albeit appearing to have been killed by the area's other residents. Robots similar to Isaac, some more damaged than others. We can also see what appear to be nitro boxes straight out of Crash Bandicoot. The player turns to see an archway labeled Midas. I know that name from the story of the king who gained the ability to turn anything into gold upon touching it, but that doesn't seem relevant. Entering further, more robots are found. With all the damage to them and the blood everywhere, it looks as if they've been fighting for their lives for a while. They've got an animal held captive, and another robot wears a similar animal as a pelt. There's also a totally adorable robot with a tail! So cute! Now, if you're very observant, you might notice that the animal model is not just a generic model. According to viewers on the Discord, this is a lion from the PlayStation Tomb Raider game, which has a stage called Palace Midas. Tomb Raider was also an IDOS game like Hexacon, and in the Valle Verde game database, the last player to play Tomb Raider was Chloe. Which brings me to, well, this. The most horrifying thing here is the giant head with an eye in the mouth. Viewers with a very sharp eye noticed that way back in episode 1 when Chloe was introduced, her portrait had her eyeball appearing in her mouth. The animals and the Midas archway are alluding to Tomb Raider, and the person playing that game was Chloe. If I'm reading the signs right, this could be her, or what remains of her. Maybe this is her fate after being sacrificed, and assets from the game she was playing have bled into the area. There's a more familiar face nearby. Isaac is here too, and he even has a girl. Way to go, man. I knew you had it in ya. Isaac was also sacrificed, so it's interesting to see him here. It looks like the ritual doesn't kill whoever is getting sacrificed, rather it sends them to Alamo. Wait, hold on. Chloe last played Tomb Raider, and assets from that game are here with her. The area with the electric sea is speculated to be the Oscar Zone, which links to Oliver, who last played Angel Quest, and that game's protagonist was in a cage in the area. Does this mean that if a child is sacrificed, it sends them to their zone in Alamo along with assets from games they played? Like, if, say, they made a save file and it was actually saved to their brain as a memory instead? I say that because, at the beginning of Hexacon, the player was instructed to save to the TH brain instead of the memory card. And does that also mean the Charlie Zone is the fourth pillar Nito mentioned? I could be making a huge stretch here, but back in episode 1, when Foxo introduces the children, Chloe came fourth out of the 5. Interesting to note. Isaac and his girl look to their left. The player follows their gaze and sees a glitchy-looking figure. The player raises their weapon, which provokes the nearby guards as they brutally gun down the player. If the creature here is really Chloe, then the robots could be very protective of her. The player respawns, but they can no longer survive the fall after respawning, crashing into a zone that looks like God's Temple from Dragon Ball Z. Probably from that cancelled Dragon Ball Z game. The player is booted out of the game with another message in base 64, which translates to Polish this time. In English it reads, "Mankind will not know peace until it turns with trust to my mercy." As friendly as ever, it seems. We cut once again to the church building. In the sky, another geometric angel looms over a white barrier with the masked figures surrounding it. It speaks in Morse code, saying, "Who is like God?" As the player approaches, a barrier appears in front of what appears to be Pietro and Matthias. Foxo is here and requests that the player place an object in the church. A pair of rulers that served as an entrance to Alamo, now referred to as a smoking square. The player complies, triggering a news report from the day John Paul I was found dead. Pope John Paul I, otherwise known as the Smiling Pope. His term only lasted 33 days before his death, which sparked many rumors at the time. The recording suddenly starts looping the phrase,
33 days earlier, 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 33 days earlier.
Now the church is gone, replaced by an obelisk with the rulers on top. Workers carry something, possibly a corpse, out of a cave and towards the construction. The painting they appear to be using as a schematic is a seriously controversial photo by Andres Serrano, who interestingly was also Catholic, of a plastic crucifix submerged in urine. Make of that what you will. The player then approaches Matthias and Pietro. Pietro, who appears to be holding a sacred staff in the heart of Jesus, gives a vague speech as the scene fades to black, and the Patreon supporters are shown. That's not all, however. Afterwards, an interview with Fulton Sheen is shown where he expresses that he prayed to die at age 80 because he thought God would have no more use for him after that. Now he wants to return from heaven after death to continue working, as though heaven were a short vacation. If you think about it, he basically did exactly that, in a way. The video fades to black for over a minute before finally the video ends. This is because the Spanish version of the video features an entirely different post-credits, an interview with a man named Alberto Merlo, who discusses the idea of conquering a country through occupying its culture. I can't really say if either of these have anything to do with the story, but that ends the third part of Valle Verde, and oh boy do I want to see more, like right now. That was too good. Typically this is where I would stop and sum up everything we now know. But, about a month after Part 3 came out, Alluvium also uploaded a document to Patreon. You can view it without joining his Patreon, but come on, join his Patreon. This series has been great and Alluvium deserves it. This document is very interesting as well. Functionally, it gives us some background lore to the game and more concrete info on the TH Brain. The document is penned by Robert Saturn, one of the players in the videos. At the end of the document, he requests assistance from another agent, which is likely where Pablo comes in. It also confirms the existence of a second VHS tape, so if in-universe Alluvium is able to find it, that'll be something to look forward to for sure. Though how did we get this document in-universe? Ah well. So, according to the document, in 1991 a study of brainwave activity was conducted by Dr. Kunimochi, a name mentioned only once in the video so far. Kunimochi wished to start a second study to learn more, but the government wouldn't provide funding a second time for reasons that may become clear, so they sought private investors. Kunimochi was able to get funding from a one Georgy D. Kostov, who is also close to Jansug's family. Jansug and Kazuya were 2 of the 20 participants in this new study. Another investor was the director of a game company called Onyxware, who were working on a title called Valle Verde. They were more than enthusiastic to implement the new technology into a life simulation style game. This eventually resulted in a prototype peripheral for the PlayStation, which would increase the console's power and be able to generate new game content on the fly. To assist with that, the device was also loaded with a database of public domain texts, songs, and movies. Naturally, this device was the TH Brain. The device itself is not a VR headset, but they probably collected the neural data they needed with something like that. To attract more investors, the TH Brain prototype was granted to a few companies who wanted to make games with it. 10 more subjects were added to the neural data collection, but the investors started getting impatient. Under the pressure, Kunimochi decided to change the data collection method to get what they needed much faster. So far, they were essentially just scanning the subject's unconscious brain activity while they were sedated. This time, the subject would have their prefrontal cortex connected directly to the device. Okay, I know there's going to be a lot of medical terms and stuff, but the point is, they're about to do something dangerous. The data collection speed increase occurs because the subject's temporal perception also increases. In other words, you're inside, our outside. Many of the subjects didn't like the idea, so they all left the project, except for Jansuga and Kazuya. 3 more subjects were recruited internationally to broaden the data they would gather, the 3 being Matthias, Chloe, and Oliver. We're shown a photo of the living quarters they were provided, and one of them has Pyoro-chan, so that must be Matthias's room. It looks a little like his house in the game. The document goes on to say that a number of games, music, movies, and texts were added to the database. These contained a lot of culturally significant images, which could explain some of the themes we've been seeing throughout the videos, since the PlayStation running Valle Verde was connected to this database as well. While the players were asleep, they were also experiencing the game as though it were real, because the device simulates whatever neural sensations they would feel if it were real. Not strictly a virtual reality, but they are perceiving it as real, almost like a dream. Oh, and the software must also approve or deny any request to safely disconnect the subjects. Yeah, what could possibly go wrong here? Did any of these guys watch Sword Art Online at all? Oh right, that didn't happen until decades later. Well, the first few sessions with the device went alright, until Jansug suffered a heart failure on December 5th. The exact cause isn't clear. They don't rule out the device itself being at fault, but they're unable to save him because the device rejected the request to disconnect him, and forcing him out could harm the others. These scientists never prepare for anything, do they? Then we get the big twist. Even after Jansug's death, his brain was still alive for a few more minutes, outputting a massive amount of data. It turns out that Kunimochi, at the behest of Kostov, had implemented a feature where the device would detect impending death and keep the subject's brain going for as long as possible. It wasn't keeping them alive, it was studying death. Kunimochi was against this, but Kostov threatened to pull the funding if Kunimochi didn't do it. Kunimochi swears this function wasn't active when Jansug died, but the investigators can't find any other explanation, nor do they know what blocked them from disconnecting Jansug, but they speculate it has something to do with Kazuya and Oliver's data. Kunimochi was more interested in using this technology to preserve life, as he had just lost his daughter and was involved with a cult. It's likely for that reason that the research team may have cut him out of the project entirely. Naturally, the research team is trying to cover everything up, as they suspect a diplomatic incident could occur if any of this ever gets out there. And that concludes the document, and oh boy was that a lot. We now know a lot more about the nature of the TH Brain. Like we thought, the content we're seeing is generated based on the learning data of its subjects. Kazuya suffers from radiation exposure, maybe from the after effects of an atomic bomb? No wonder there were so many allusions to nuclear war. To make sure we have our timeline straight, let's recap. Jansug died on December 5th, the report we just saw was filed on the 20th, and the tape we've been seeing was recorded starting from February 14th the next year. The children were still connected to the device at the time, with Oliver and Kazuya also showing signs of vital deterioration, and their data is doing something to block the research team from disconnecting everyone. I think I'm getting an idea of what might have gone wrong. Here's my theory. Jansuk died because he was subjected to the sacrifice ceremony that we saw. The game world isn't real, sure, but their brains are being made to feel as though it were. I'm no doctor, but I think that if something could force his heart rate into seriously high or low levels, that would be fatal for sure. Post-sacrifice, they're sent to Alamo, which is certainly looking like a version of hell at this point, along with images related to their memory, including whatever games they were playing. Hence, game objects in Chloe's area of Alamo. I also think there are multiple AI characters. Not hides in terror, the Oracle took a liking to her artwork, but the question of where the Golden Bull actually came from and why the NPCs are obeying it is still up in the air. A second theory, which does contradict my own I must admit, is that during the 9 minutes Jansuk's brain was alive, he could see the afterlife, and the data gathering machine started drawing from whatever it was he saw, whether it was from above or below. And yet the strange occult and religious imagery may also have something to do with Kunimochi's cult activities, but there is still so much yet to be answered, and with the second tape's existence confirmed, I simply cannot wait for its contents to be revealed. But that should conclude the footage from the VHS tape that's been at the center of this story. One can only imagine then where things go from here, but one thing's for sure. The game is far from over, and I'm sure in 10 more months, we can look forward to another incredible episode by Alluvium once again. Thank you all for watching, thank you Alluvium for creating this wonderful series. I'm Ephraim225, and I'll see you next time. Later!